When did everyone at school start handing you money? I was walking through the main entrance of school when this Kayad I'd never seen before stepped right in front of me, reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. Before I could say anything, he pressed it into my hand and gave me this sad look like someone told him to stop gooning. "I'm sorry for your loss, bro," he said, squeezing my shoulder. I stood there holding the 20 feeling completely confused. The kid walked away before I could ask what he was talking about. I figured maybe he had me mixed up with someone else, so I pocketed the money and headed to my locker. 3 more people nodded at me in the hallway with these serious expressions on their faces. At my locker, a girl from my English class came up holding a $10 bill. She had tears in her eyes as she handed it to me, saying the same thing about being sorry for my loss. I tried to tell her I hadn't lost anything, but she hugged me and walked away sniffling. Now I had $30 and no idea what was happening. During first period, 2 more kids slipped me money when the teacher wasn't looking. One gave me $5 and another gave me 15. They both whispered condolences and patted my back. Even my teacher kept glancing at me with this pitying expression. When class ended, she pulled me aside and handed me $40 from her purse, telling me to stay strong. By lunch, I was carrying over $100 in my pockets. Kids I barely knew were coming up to me with cash and sad faces. Some hugged me while others just nodded respectfully and walked away. A group of freshmen pooled their lunch money together and gave me $23 in crumpled 1s and 5s. The lunch lady wouldn't even let me pay for my food. The weirdest part was that everyone seemed to know something I didn't. They kept mentioning my grandfather and how brave he was. One kid said it was amazing that he served our country, and another mentioned something about a war. I didn't even have a grandfather who was alive, let alone one who died in a war. Both my grandfathers passed away before I was born from regular old age. In gym class, the coach pulled me aside and handed me a $50 bill. He said he understood if I needed to sit out today given the circumstances. I was about to ask what circumstances when 3 seniors walked over and each handed me $20. They saluted me like I was some kind of military family member, and said my grandfather was a hero. The money kept coming all afternoon. Kids emptied their wallets and gave me whatever they had. Some only had a couple dollars while others gave me 20s and 10s. A girl in my art class started a collection right there in the classroom and gathered $37 from other students. Even the janitor stopped me in the hallway to give me a 5. By the time the final bell rang, my pockets were stuffed with bills. I went to the bathroom and counted it all in a stall. $311 total. My hands were shaking as I separated the bills by denomination, trying to make sense of what was happening. Everyone at school thought someone in my family had died, but nobody in my family was even sick. I walked out of school feeling like I was in some weird dream. Kids were still nodding at me respectfully, and a few more tried to give me money, but I waved them off. My pockets were already bulging, and I didn't want to take advantage of whatever misunderstanding was happening. I just needed to get home and figure out what was going on. As soon as I got to my room, I called my best friend Adam, who'd been homesick all day. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding congested and miserable. I immediately started telling him about the money and the weird comments about my grandfather. He was quiet for a long moment before clearing his throat. "Dude, you don't know about the GoFundMe?" Adam asked, sounding surprised. My stomach dropped. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. Adam said everyone had been sharing it on social media since last night. He couldn't believe I hadn't seen it yet. My phone had been acting up lately and I hadn't checked Instagram or anything all day because I was too confused by the money situation. "Check your messages," Adam said. "I'll send you the link right now." A second later, my phone buzzed with a link from Adam. I clicked on it and waited for the page to load. The GoFundMe appeared with a title that made my blood run cold. It said, "Help send back our grandfather who died on vacation," and already had over $2,000 raised. The description talked about funeral costs and transportation fees. I scrolled down to see who started the fundraiser and nearly dropped my phone. Right there in bold letters, it showed the organizer's name. Brooke Marino. My cousin Brooke, who I hadn't talked to in 2 years since our families had that huge fight over my uncle borrowing money and never paying it back. My hand started shaking as I stared at her name on the screen. She was using my name and my school to collect money for something that never happened. Adam was still on the phone asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer right away. I scrolled through the fundraiser description, and it was full of lies about my grandfather dying while visiting some war memorial in Europe. The story said he was a decorated veteran who served 3 tours, and now we needed help bringing his body home. None of it was true, and Brooke knew both my grandfathers died before I was even born. I told Adam it was my cousin who started this whole thing, and he went quiet for a second before saying that was messed up. With Adam still on the phone, I tried calling Brooke, but she didn't pick up. I called 3 times in a row, and each time it went straight to voicemail. Then I texted her asking what she was doing and why she would use my name like this. Those 3 dots appeared showing she was typing, but then they disappeared. They came back again and disappeared again like she was writing and deleting over and over. I waited 5 minutes watching those dots come and go, but no message ever came through. Adam suggested I check her social media to see if she posted anything about this. I pulled up her Instagram while keeping Adam on speaker and started scrolling through her recent posts. 3 days ago, she posted about college application fees being crazy expensive. 2 weeks before that, she was complaining about SAT prep courses costing thousands of dollars. Last month, she posted a whole rant about how unfair it was that her parents couldn't help with college costs. The pieces started clicking together in my head and I felt sick. She was using my dead grandfather's story to pay for her college stuff. I told Adam what I found and he said I needed to tell my parents right away. But I was scared they might think I was part of it somehow since I had all this cash in my pockets. Adam said they'd understand once I explained everything, but I wasn't so sure. My mom called me down for dinner and I told Adam I'd text him later. I went downstairs with $311 stuffed in my pockets, feeling like everyone could see it bulging out. At the dinner table, my parents were talking about normal stuff like work and what to watch on TV later. I pushed my food around my plate, barely eating anything while they chatted. My mom asked if I was feeling okay, and I just nodded, saying I wasn't that hungry. The cash felt like it was burning through my pockets, and I kept thinking about all those kids at the school who gave me their lunch money. My dad was telling some story about his coworker, but I couldn't focus on anything he was saying. After 20 minutes of pretending to eat, I finally worked up the courage. I stood up and went to my room to get all the money. When I came back, I dumped the whole pile of bills on the kitchen table. My mom's eyes went wide as she stared at all the cash scattered across the table. I started explaining everything from the beginning about the kid giving me $20 that morning. I told them about everyone at the school thinking my grandfather died and how they kept giving me money all day. Then I showed them the GoFundMe on my phone and pointed to Brooke's name as the organizer. My mom grabbed my phone to look closer while my dad's face turned red. He immediately pulled out his phone and called his brother Ron, who was Brooke's father. The phone rang and rang, but Uncle Ron didn't pick up. Dad called again and still no answer. We all knew their family had been struggling since Uncle Ron's business went under last year. He'd been doing construction work but got hurt and couldn't work for months. Still, this was beyond anything we could have imagined Brooke would do. Mom started taking screenshots of everything on the GoFundMe page, including all the donation amounts and comments. Dad left another voicemail for his brother, and this time his voice was shaking with anger. He told Ron to call him back immediately, and that he knew what Brooke had done. Then he called again, and left an even angrier message saying, this was fraud and identity theft. I sat there watching my parents deal with this mess, feeling guilty, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Part of me wondered if everyone at the school would think I was involved in the scam. Mom said we needed to document everything and started making a list of all the people who gave me money. Dad was pacing around the kitchen, still trying to reach his brother and getting more upset each time it went to voicemail. They told me to go to bed and that we'd figure out what to do in the morning. I barely slept that night thinking about facing everyone at the school. The next morning felt different because now I knew the truth about what was happening. I got to the school early and stood near the main entrance, not sure what to do. A freshman came up to me holding a $5 bill and I told him to keep it. I explained there had been a mistake, but he insisted his whole homeroom had already collected it for me. He pushed the money into my hand and walked away before I could give it back. I needed to find Adam before first period to figure out what to do. I spotted him by his locker and rushed over to tell him about everything that happened with my parents. We made a plan where he would help me write a social media post explaining the whole situation. Meanwhile, I would go to the principal's office to report what was happening before things got worse. Adam started drafting something on his phone while I headed to the office. I told the secretary I needed to see the principal about something urgent. She made me wait 10 minutes before Mr. Gregory Shepard called me into his office. I sat down and started explaining everything from the beginning, just like I had with my parents. Mr. Shepard listened carefully and took notes while I talked. When I showed him the GoFundMe on my phone, his face got serious. He pulled it up on his computer to see it on a bigger screen. His expression got darker when he saw how much money had been raised using our school's name. Mr. Shepard picked up his desk phone and called the vice principal's extension, asking her to come to his office right away. Then he called the school counselor and told him it was urgent. Within 5 minutes, both of them were standing in his office looking at the GoFundMe page on his computer screen. The vice principal's face went pale when she saw how much money had been raised. The counselor kept shaking his head and muttering about identity theft. They huddled around Mr. Shepard's desk, talking in low voices about what to do next. The vice principal suggested calling the district office, but Mr. Shepard said we needed to act fast before more people donated. He started typing an email on his computer while the counselor took notes about everything I'd told them. The vice principal asked me for Brooke's full name and her parents' contact information, which I gave them from my phone. Mr. Shepard finished typing and turned his monitor so we could all read the email he was about to send to every parent in the school. It explained that a fraudulent fundraiser had been created using my name, and that anyone who donated should request a refund immediately. He clicked send, and the email went out to over 2,000 parents. The counselor said I should get back to class, but to come see him if I needed to talk. I grabbed my backpack and headed to second period, feeling sick to my stomach about what was coming next. As soon as I sat down in my math class, my phone started vibrating in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw dozens of notifications flooding my screen. Text messages and Instagram DMs were coming in faster than I could read them. Some kids were calling me a scammer and demanding their money back right now. Others were confused and asking if the whole thing was fake. A few people were actually laughing and making jokes about the dead grandfather who never existed. The girl sitting next to me saw my phone screen and gasped loud enough for half the class to hear. She whispered to the kid behind her, and within seconds, everyone was staring at me. The teacher tried to get everyone's attention back, but kids were already pulling out their phones to check their messages. I could hear people whispering my name and saw them showing each other their screens. My face burned as I shoved my phone back in my pocket and stared at my textbook. The rest of the period dragged on forever with everyone sneaking glances at me. When the bell finally rang, I rushed out of the classroom and headed straight to the cafeteria. Adam was already there waiting for me by the entrance, looking worried. He said everyone was talking about the email and asking him what really happened. I told him I needed to explain everything to everyone at once, or this would get even worse. We walked into the cafeteria, and I could feel hundreds of eyes following me. Kids at every table were whispering and pointing as I walked past. I climbed up on an empty table in the middle of the room, and my legs were shaking so bad I almost fell. Adam stood next to the table to make sure I didn't slip. My voice cracked when I started talking, but I forced myself to keep going. I explained that my grandfather didn't die, and that the whole fundraiser was fake. I told them someone in my family had created it without my knowledge, and that everyone needed to get their money back from the website. The cafeteria erupted with voices all talking at once. Some kids started yelling that I owed them their cash right now. Others were asking how I didn't know about a fundraiser with my own name on it. A group of seniors looked ready to come over and make me pay them back physically. The lunch lady who had given me free food yesterday was standing behind the counter with her arms crossed, looking angrier than I'd ever seen her. She shook her head at me like I'd personally betrayed her trust. A few kids actually felt bad for me and said it wasn't my fault if someone else made the fake fundraiser, but most people just wanted their money back and didn't care about the details. Adam helped me down from the table and we rushed out of the cafeteria before things got worse. We went straight to the main hallway where there was an empty table near the trophy cases. Adam pulled out his laptop and connected to the school Wi-Fi while I stood guard. He pulled up the GoFundMe page and turned the screen so people walking by could see it. We started telling everyone who passed to report the page as fraudulent and request their refunds. Kids crowded around the table taking pictures of the screen with their phones. Adam made a list of everyone who said they donated, so we could track who got refunded. More and more students gathered around us between classes until the hallway was completely blocked. Teachers started coming over to see what was causing the commotion. My English teacher pushed through the crowd and found me standing behind the table. She pulled me aside and said she was sorry for giving me money yesterday. She felt terrible about not checking if the story was real first. She asked if there was anything she could do to help fix this mess. I told her we were trying to make sure everyone knew it was a scam, so they could get refunded. She said she would email all the other teachers and explain what happened, so they could help spread the word. She squeezed my shoulder and went to find the other teachers in the faculty lounge. The bell rang for the next period, but kids were still crowded around our table. Mr. Shepard's voice suddenly came over the intercom telling everyone to return to class immediately. Then he started explaining that a fraudulent fundraiser had been created using a student's identity without their knowledge. He didn't say Brooke's name, but he made it clear I was a victim of identity theft. He asked for everyone's cooperation in resolving the situation, and said anyone who donated should request a refund through the website. He also said anyone caught harassing me about the situation would face disciplinary action. The crowd around our table slowly broke up as kids headed to their classes. Adam and I packed up the laptop and went to our separate classes feeling exhausted. The rest of the day was a blur of dirty looks and whispered comments wherever I went. Some teachers tried to act normal, but I could tell they felt awkward around me. When the final bell rang, I practically ran to the main entrance where my mom's car was waiting. She looked stressed as I got in and immediately asked if I was okay. I started to answer when I noticed the news van parked across the street. A reporter and camera operator were standing on the sidewalk trying to interview students as they left. Mom hit the gas and we drove away before they could spot us. Dad was already in the car and he explained that someone had called the local news about the fundraising scam. The reporters wanted to interview me, but my parents weren't letting that happen. We drove straight to the police station instead of going home. The building was cold and smelled like coffee and cleaning products. Dad told the officer at the front desk we needed to file a report for fraud and identity theft. We waited on hard plastic chairs for 20 minutes before a detective called us back to his office. He took out a form and started asking questions about everything that had happened. I explained about the money at the school and finding the GoFundMe and discovering Brooke had created it. The detective typed everything into his computer and said this was actually more common than people think. He said fake fundraisers pop up all the time and people rarely face serious consequences. He took screenshots of the GoFundMe page and said he would contact the website about getting it removed. He gave us a case number and said someone would follow up in a few days. We drove home in silence and I went straight to my room feeling completely drained. I was lying on my bed when I heard Dad's phone ring downstairs. Even from my room, I could hear him getting louder and angrier. It was Uncle Ron finally calling back and he was trying to defend Brooke. Dad wasn't having any of it and kept saying that stealing is stealing no matter what excuse she had. My phone buzzed on my nightstand and I grabbed it expecting another angry message from a classmate. Instead, it was a long text from Brooke with 3 crying emojis at the start. She wrote this whole thing about how sorry she was and how she never expected it to get this big. The part that made me mad was when she said she was planning to tell me and split the money 50-50. I screenshot the message immediately and sent it to my parents because that sounded like an admission of guilt to me. Within 10 minutes, the GoFundMe page disappeared from the internet completely. Adam texted me that it showed an error message now instead of the fundraiser. Later that night, Mom got an email from GoFundMe saying they were investigating reports of fraud and had frozen all funds. The total had reached almost $3,000 before they shut it down. They promised everyone would get refunded, but said it could take up to 7 business days to process everything. Wednesday dragged by with more kids asking questions and teachers giving me weird looks. That night, Mom helped me organize all the cash I'd collected into labeled envelopes with sticky notes showing who gave what amount. We counted $311 exactly like I'd calculated in the bathroom stall. Thursday morning, I got to the school early and went straight to the main office with my backpack full of envelopes. The principal was already there with the school treasurer setting up a table in the conference room. Word spread fast, and by first period there was a line of kids waiting to get their money back. I stood there for 2 hours straight handing back 5s and 10s and 20s while apologizing over and over. Some kids grabbed their money and left without saying anything. Others told me it wasn't my fault and they understood. A few refused to take their money back at all. This one sophomore pushed his $10 back across the table and said I should keep it for all the trouble I'd been through. 2 other kids did the same thing with their money. I tried to convince them to take it, but they walked away leaving $37 on the table. The treasurer put it in a separate envelope and said we'd figure out what to do with it later. During gym class, the coach called me over while everyone else was doing laps. He handed me back the 50 he'd given me on Tuesday and shook his head. He said he was impressed with how I was handling everything, and admitted he should have been suspicious about a kid needing cash donations. He said in 30 years of teaching, he'd never seen anything quite like this situation. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing all morning with notifications from group chats and social media. Screenshots of Brooke's fake story about my grandfather being a war hero were everywhere. Someone had turned it into a meme template with different captions making fun of her. One said, "When you need money for concert tickets," with her fundraiser description underneath. Another one had her school photo with fraud level 1000 written across it. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I thought she deserved it after what she put me through. Thursday afternoon, an email went out to all parents from the school district's legal department. They said they were aware of the fraudulent fundraiser that had used our school's name and logo without permission. The email said they were sending cease and desist letters and documenting everything for potential legal action. They also announced new policies about verifying any fundraising efforts involving students or school property. By the time Friday morning came around, I was completely exhausted from the week's drama. Kids were still talking about it, but the tone had changed. Now it was more like a cautionary tale with people sharing stories about other online scams they'd heard about. In my English class, the teacher actually used it as an example for our unit on digital literacy and source verification. During lunch, I sat with Adam and tried to eat while people kept coming up to our table. Most just wanted to know if I'd gotten my money back or if Brooke was going to jail. That afternoon, the local news van showed up again and filmed outside the school. Later that night, my parents and I watched the segment on TV. They called it "Online Fundraising Fraud Hits Local High School" and talked about how scammers use emotional stories to trick people into donating. They blurred my face in the footage and didn't use my name but showed screenshots of the fake GoFundMe page. The reporter interviewed some expert about how to spot fraudulent fundraisers and mentioned that over 60% of online fundraisers have some element of exaggeration or false information. Saturday morning, my parents drove me to a law office downtown to meet with an attorney named Aubrey Nakamura. She had all these degrees on her wall and a really organized desk with color-coded folders. She explained that we could file a civil suit against Brooke's family for damages, including emotional distress and defamation. She said the fact that Brooke admitted in writing that she planned to split the money with me was pretty strong evidence of intent to commit fraud. My parents looked at each other, and I could tell they were uncomfortable with the idea of suing family members. Mom asked what would happen if we didn't pursue legal action, and Aubrey said Brooke could still face criminal charges if the district attorney decided to prosecute. She said fraud over $1,000 was a felony in our state, but since Brooke was 17, they'd probably handle it in juvenile court. We left the law office around noon, and my parents were quiet the whole drive home. That weekend, my phone went crazy with messages from people I didn't even know who had donated to the fake fundraiser. Some guy from 3 states away sent me this long, angry message about how he'd given $50 thinking he was helping a grieving family, and now felt like an idiot. Another woman sent me screenshots showing she'd shared the fundraiser with her whole church group, and now everyone thought she was part of the scam. A few people were actually pretty understanding, though, and shared their own stories about getting tricked online. One lady told me about losing $500 to a fake charity for hurricane victims, and said at least most people were getting refunds from my situation. I spent hours reading through all these messages and feeling worse with each one, even though none of it was my fault. Sunday afternoon, a car pulled up in our driveway, and I watched from my bedroom window as Uncle Ron and his wife got out with Brooke. My mom answered the door, and there was this awkward moment where nobody seemed to know what to say before she let them in. I came downstairs, and Brooke looked terrible with dark circles under her eyes and her hair all messy like she hadn't slept in days. She started crying the second she saw me and kept saying she was sorry over and over. Her mom had to put her arm around her to keep her from completely falling apart. Brooke said she got the idea from seeing other viral fundraisers online and thought nobody would find out if she just took a little money for college applications. She never expected it to blow up like this, or for the whole school to start giving me cash in person. Uncle Ron stood there looking uncomfortable and said they wanted to make things right. He pulled out his checkbook and said he'd pay back anyone who didn't get refunded by GoFundMe, even though we all knew they didn't have that kind of money. His business had failed last year, and they'd been struggling to pay their mortgage. My dad told him to put the checkbook away and said GoFundMe would handle the refunds, but the damage to our family relationships was already done. The whole visit lasted maybe 20 minutes before they left with Brooke still crying in the back seat. My parents spent the rest of Sunday arguing about whether to press charges or let it go since she was family. Monday morning at the school felt weird but almost normal compared to the previous week. Kids had moved on to other drama, but every once in a while someone would make a joke about my dead grandfather. In the hallway between classes, this kid yelled asking if my grandma needed a fundraiser too, and his friends all laughed. I tried to laugh along because getting mad would just make things worse and give them more ammunition. During morning announcements, the principal came on talking about new policies for any fundraising efforts using student names or school affiliation. From now on, everything had to be verified through the main office with documentation before anyone could collect money or post online using our school's name. Mr. Shepard found me at lunch and made this joke about how I'd inadvertently helped improve school security protocols. He said in 30 years of teaching, he'd never had to create an anti-fraud policy because of a student's cousin. Adam had been working all weekend on this spreadsheet tracking the refunds to make sure everyone got their money back. He showed me during study hall, and we discovered about $200 worth of donations came from complete strangers who saw the fundraiser shared in random Facebook groups and Twitter threads. These people had no connection to our school or town, but felt bad about a kid losing his grandfather and wanted to help. The girl from my art class who had organized that classroom collection found me after school looking really upset. She kept apologizing over and over, saying she felt terrible about not verifying the story first. She said her dad gave her this whole lecture about believing everything on the internet, and now she promised to be more careful about checking sources before jumping into causes. I told her it wasn't her fault since everyone believed it, but she still looked guilty walking away. 2 weeks passed, and most people had gotten their refunds, though some were still pending because of processing delays. The whole thing had become this running joke at the school, with people pretending to collect money for increasingly ridiculous fake causes. Someone started a fundraiser for their goldfish's funeral, and another kid made one for his girlfriend who supposedly got abducted by aliens. The teachers had to start shutting down these joke fundraisers because they were getting out of hand. During those 2 weeks, Brooke posted this long public apology on her Instagram and Facebook, admitting to everything. She wrote about how desperate she'd been about college costs, and how her anxiety made her do something stupid. She promised to pay back anyone who lost money because of processing fees or whatever, and said she was getting help from a therapist for her anxiety issues. Most of the comments were pretty harsh, calling her a thief and worse, but a few people said they appreciated her owning up to it. The police had been investigating the whole time, and finally made their decision about 3 weeks after everything started. The detective called my parents to say they weren't going to press criminal charges since Brooke was still 17, and most of the money had been returned through refunds. But she got banned from all fundraising platforms permanently, and had to complete 200 hours of community service. The detective said if she'd been 18, it would have been different, and she probably would have faced actual fraud charges. My mom kept shaking her head every time Uncle Ron's name came up after that. She'd start doing dishes really hard whenever someone mentioned him or Brooke. Dad stopped answering his brother's calls completely. The few times Uncle Ron showed up at our door, Dad would just stand there blocking the entrance, not saying anything until he left. Mom threw away all the family photos that had them in it. I watched her tear up the one from last Thanksgiving where we were all together before everything went bad. She put the pieces in the garbage disposal and ran it for a long time. Dad said Uncle Ron made his choice when he defended Brooke's theft, instead of making her face what she did. The split felt permanent this time, not like their other fights that would blow over after a few weeks. This one cut too deep. A month went by and things at the school finally started feeling normal again. Kids still made jokes sometimes about my dead grandfather coming back from vacation. One guy in my math class would salute me whenever I walked in, but it was more funny than mean now. The whole thing had turned into this weird school legend that freshmen heard about from older kids. Teachers stopped giving me those sad looks in the hallways. The lunch lady went back to charging me for food. Everything felt regular again except for the occasional reminder when someone would ask if my grandfather was still dead. I'd just laugh and say he was doing great. The school counselor kept calling me down to her office every week to check how I was handling everything. She'd sit there with her notebook asking if I needed to talk about the trauma or the family situation. I kept telling her I was fine, but she insisted on these weekly meetings anyway. She said what I did took real guts and integrity. She kept using that word integrity like it was supposed to mean something special. During one meeting, she mentioned the school was planning something positive to come from all this mess. 2 weeks later, they announced this huge fundraising drive for local veterans at an assembly. The principal made this whole speech about helping real causes and verifying everything properly. He didn't mention my name, but everyone knew why we were suddenly doing this. The student council set up collection boxes in every hallway with clear labels showing exactly where the money would go. They partnered with the local VFW and had actual veterans come speak at lunch. We ended up raising $5,347 in just 2 weeks. Every penny got tracked and documented with receipts posted on the school website. The whole thing felt good after all the fake fundraiser drama. The veterans who came to pick up the check seemed really grateful. One old guy in a Navy hat shook my hand and said he heard about what happened with the fake fundraiser. He thought it was great that something real came from it. 3 months after everything started, I got this official-looking envelope from GoFundMe. Inside was a letter on their letterhead apologizing for the security breach that let Brooke create the fake fundraiser. They confirmed every single donation had been refunded, though some people had to wait longer because of bank processing times. At the bottom, they offered me a year of their premium fundraising tools for free. I threw the letter in the trash. Like I'd ever want to use their site again after everything. Around that same time, I started being able to laugh about the whole thing myself. When new kids at the school asked about my family, I'd tell them my grandfather was doing amazing for a dead guy. Or I'd say he loved his permanent vacation so much he decided to stay. People would look confused at first, then laugh when they got the joke. It felt better to own it than to keep explaining what really happened. Brooke texted me out of nowhere one night asking if we could talk. She wrote this long message about how sorry she was, and how she missed being cousins. She wanted to know if maybe we could try to fix things between us. I stared at that message for 20 minutes before typing back. I told her maybe someday, but not now. I needed more time to get over what she put me and my family through. She sent back a crying emoji but didn't push it. The yearbook committee announced the senior awards and somehow I got voted most likely to fact check. Everyone thought it was hilarious. They wanted me to pose with a magnifying glass and a stack of fake money for the photo. I figured why not embrace it. The photographer had me looking through the magnifying glass at a dollar bill with this serious expression. When the yearbook came out, that picture was right there next to all the normal awards. My parents actually ordered extra copies to send to relatives. Well, the relatives we still talk to anyway. Mom and Dad kept telling me how proud they were of how I handled everything. We'd be eating dinner and Dad would randomly bring up how I could have kept all that money but didn't. Mom would add that showing integrity when it's hard is what makes someone's character. We spent more time together after going through all that drama. Family movie nights became a real thing instead of just something we talked about doing. Even just sitting around talking felt different and better. Adam came over one afternoon with his laptop and this idea he'd been working on. He showed me this Facebook page he'd started called Verify Before You Give. It was all about checking if local fundraisers and charity drives were legitimate. He'd already posted guides on how to spot fake fundraisers and red flags to watch for. We spent the next few hours adding more content and sharing it in local community groups. Within a week, we had 300 followers. People started sending us fundraisers to verify. We'd research them and post whether they checked out or not. Some were totally legitimate, and we'd help promote those. Others were obviously scams that we'd warn people about. A few were just confused situations that needed clarification. The page kept growing, and soon we had over 1,000 followers from all over the state checking our posts before donating to anything. By May, the whole fake grandfather thing had become old news at the school. Kids were already obsessed with prom drama, and who was dating who, and nobody really brought up the fundraiser anymore. I walked through the halls without anyone giving me weird looks or making jokes about dead relatives. The senior class had moved on to bigger scandals, like when 2 teachers got caught making out in the supply closet. My inbox that used to be full of angry messages was now just normal school stuff and memes from friends. Even the verify before you give page had slowed down since most local fundraisers were legit, and there wasn't much drama to report. One afternoon, my guidance counselor called me into her office with a big envelope in her hand. She pushed it across the desk and told me to open it. Inside was an acceptance letter from my top choice college along with a decent scholarship offer. She asked if I was planning to write about the whole fundraiser mess in my application essays. I told her I wasn't sure if colleges wanted to hear about family drama and getting scammed by my own cousin. She said it would actually make a great essay about integrity and doing the right thing even when it's hard. That night, I sat at my computer trying to write about it, but kept deleting everything because it felt weird turning all that drama into a college essay. A week later, Brooke texted me out of nowhere with a screenshot of her community college acceptance. She wrote this long message about working 2 jobs at the mall to pay for classes, and how she was trying to do things right this time. I stared at the message for a while before typing back, "Good luck," and leaving it at that. Graduation day came faster than expected, with all of us packed into the gym in our caps and gowns. Mr. Shepard got up to give his principal speech and started talking about how our class had learned important lessons this year. He mentioned something about digital literacy and the importance of verification in the internet age. Everyone started laughing because we all knew exactly what he was talking about. Even I had to smile sitting there in my folding chair, remembering how crazy everything had gotten. After the ceremony, my parents took pictures with me, but half our family wasn't there. Uncle Ron and his side had stopped coming to family events after everything went down. My mom said some relatives blamed us for not helping Brooke with college money in the first place. My dad said others thought we did the right thing by exposing the scam. Either way, our summer barbecues were going to be a lot smaller from now on. A reporter from the local news showed up at our house in July wanting to do a follow-up story. She said the school district was using our situation as an example of why they needed better online safety education. They filmed me for maybe 5 minutes just talking about how the school had new policies now. I managed to laugh about it on camera, saying at least something good came from all the craziness. The segment aired that night with the title, "Local School Turns Scam into Learning Opportunity," which sounded way more positive than how it actually felt going through it. August rolled around and I started packing boxes for college. My mom helped me sort through old school stuff when I found a white envelope stuffed between some notebooks. Inside was $311 in mixed bills that I'd forgotten about. It was the original cash kids had given me that first day before I knew about the GoFundMe. I'd kept it separate when returning all the money because I wanted to remember what started everything. Mom asked if I was going to bring it to college, but I decided to leave it in my desk drawer at home. Looking at those bills reminded me that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. The whole fake grandfather fundraiser had taught me more about family drama and internet scams than any class could have. I learned that people will believe anything they see online without checking if it's real. I learned that family can surprise you in the worst ways when money gets involved. I learned that telling the truth can make you unpopular, but at least you can sleep at night. Most importantly, I learned that I could handle weird situations without losing myself. College was going to throw all kinds of new problems at me, but after surviving Brooke's scam and all the drama that followed, I felt ready for anything. The money in that envelope would stay in my drawer, as proof that even when everyone thinks you should do one thing, you can still choose what's right. That was worth more than any amount of cash anyone could offer. All right, that's all from me today. Thanks for sticking with me and letting me throw all my questions out there. Until next time, stay curious. Like the video, it helps more than you think.